The wind was a serrated blade, honed on the glacial peaks of Xylos and driven with relentless force across the frozen plains. It clawed at the Kryll mine, a jagged scar etched into the bone-white landscape, its entrance a gaping maw spewing dust and the exhaust of overworked machinery. Kryll mines weren't built. They were carved, hacked from the planet's very core with a brutal efficiency that left little room for beauty, and even less for comfort. From a distance, the mine resembled a petrified leviathan, its skeletal ribs jutting out from the icy terrain. Up close, it was a claustrophobic labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, illuminated by flickering, energy-starved lamps that cast long, dancing shadows. The air hung thick and heavy, a cocktail of frozen methane, metallic dust, and the sickly sweet, almost hypnotic aroma of concentrated Kryll. Inside, the miners toiled, their hunched figures like specters in the dim light. They were the Kryll junkies, as the council called them, a derogatory term that clung to them like the frost that coated their worn clothing. Their faces, etched with hardship and illuminated by the ghastly glow, told stories of lives spent in perpetual twilight, lungs scarred by the planet's harsh atmosphere, and bodies aching with the constant labor. Jax wiped the condensation from his oxygen mask, the recycled air doing little to alleviate the biting cold that seeped into his bones. He'd been working this seam for 15 years, and the chill never lessened. He glanced at the chrono embedded in his gauntlet, 7 o'clock standard, another cycle beginning. The sounds of the mine were a constant, jarring symphony of deprivation. The screech of drills biting into Kryll deposits, the groaning of support beams protesting under the weight of the icy mountain, the rhythmic drag of chains hauling harvested Kryll to the surface, and the throbbing pulse of the Kryll filtering machinery, a cacophony that hammered at his sanity, yet was, paradoxically, the rhythm of his existence. Today felt different, though. Jax couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. The wind howled with unusual ferocity, rattling the rusted supports of the tunnel. The tremors, normally a background vibration, were becoming more frequent and violent. He tightened his grip on his pulse rifle, a relic of the border wars, salvaged and modified to be a mining tool, but still lethal in the right hands. "Jax!" A voice crackled over his comm. It was Mara, his foreman. "Seam 7's unstable. Get your team out. Now!" His heart lurched. Seam 7 was where Lyra, his daughter, was working today. His daughter, barely 16 cycles old, her face still soft with the remnants of childhood, forced to labor alongside him in the unforgiving depths of Xylos. It wasn't a life he'd wanted for her, but Kryll was life on Xylos, and survival was a brutal equation. "Lyra's in Seam 7, he responded, his voice tight with anxiety. "I'm going in." "Jax, that's an order. Evacuate!" Mara's voice was insistent. He ignored her. He knew the mine, every crevice, every fault line. He knew how to move quickly, how to anticipate danger. He couldn't afford to wait. He pushed the throttle on his mining rig, the machine responding with a reluctant growl as it lumbered forward. The tunnel narrowed, forcing him to duck his head. The rhythmic pounding of the drill became deafening, a maddening metronome counting down to disaster. The ground trembled more violently now, dust cascading from the ceiling. He found her in a small alcove, huddled with 3 other Kryll junkies, faces etched with fear. Lyra's face lit up as she saw him, a fleeting smile illuminating the grime. "Dad!" "No time for greetings," Jax said, his voice harsh with urgency. "Seam 7's collapsing. We have to move now." He grabbed Lyra's hand, the warmth of her gloved hand a small comfort in the overwhelming cold. The group scrambled out of the alcove, Jax leading the way, his instincts honed by years of experience in the mines. Then it happened. A deafening roar tore through the tunnel, followed by a shudder that threatened to rip the supports from their foundations. The roof began to buckle, sections of ice and rock collapsing inward. "Run!" Jax yelled, shoving Lyra forward. They sprinted through the collapsing tunnel, debris raining down around them. The walls were closing in, the tunnel shrinking with every second. Jax knew they wouldn't make it. "Dad, I can't!" Lyra cried, stumbling over a fallen rock. Without hesitation, Jax pushed her ahead, towards the faint glimmer of light at the tunnel's end. Go, Lyra! Run! He turned back, bracing himself against the support beam that was groaning under immense pressure. The tunnel behind them collapsed, sealing off their escape. Dad! Lyra's scream pierced the chaos. Jax stared at his daughter, her face a mask of terror, her eyes wide with disbelief. He knew this was the end. He had failed to protect her. He managed a strained smile. Be strong, Lyra. Live for both of us. The beam gave way. The world exploded in a blinding white light. Then nothing. Jax awoke to the sterile chill of a metal table. He gasped, struggling to sit up, his body screaming in protest. He was no longer in the mine. He was in a stark, white room, surrounded by unfamiliar machines and illuminated by a soft, pulsating, green light. Panic clawed at his throat. Where was Lyra? Was she safe? He tried to stand, but his limbs felt heavy, foreign. He looked down at his hands, and his breath hitched. They were different. Sleeker, stronger, with subtle metallic sheens woven into the skin. A figure moved into his line of sight. It was an alien, unlike anything he had ever seen before. Tall and slender, with smooth turquoise skin that seemed to absorb the light. Her eyes were large and black, devoid of pupils, and held a strange, unreadable intelligence. You are awake, she said, her voice strangely melodic and filtered through an unseen device. Where am I? What happened to Lyra? Jax demanded, his voice rough and strained. You were dead. But I saved you, in a way, she replied, tilting her head slightly. As for Lyra, she is safe, for now. What does that mean? For now? Jax's body tensed. The alien scientist walked closer, her gaze piercing. Your body was damaged beyond repair. But your mind, your essence, it was salvageable. I have rebuilt you, Jax. I have made you better. Jax stared at her, a whirlwind of emotion swirling within him. Hope, fear, confusion, and a growing sense of dread. He was no longer the man he once was. He was something else, something new, something other. Why? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why did you do this to me? Anya simply replied. Because time is running out, and your skill will be greatly needed for us to survive as a planet. The emergency beacon shrieked, a high-pitched whine that cut through the already oppressive din of the Kryll mine. But Jax barely registered it. His world had narrowed to the seam of glittering orange crystals in front of him, the rhythmic thrum of his mining rig, and the persistent ache in his back. The Kryll, the lifeblood of Xylos and the bane of his existence, demanded constant attention. He adjusted the focusing lens of his miner's lamp, bathing the crystalline vein in a blinding white light. Kryll, in its raw form, was a beautiful thing. Like frozen fire, it pulsed with an inner luminescence, its geometric facets reflecting the light in a kaleidoscope of orange hues. It held the promise of warmth, of energy, of a future, however bleak, for his daughter. But its beauty was a siren's call, masking the inherent danger and insidious allure of addiction. Jax's face, framed by the worn, oily fabric of his mining hood, was a roadmap of hard-won survival. Deep lines were etched around his eyes, the legacy of staring into the unforgiving glare of the Kryll deposits for years. A jagged scar, a pale white line that bisected his left eyebrow and disappeared into his hairline, was a souvenir from a rockfall during his rookie cycles. Smaller scars, like whispers across his skin, told stories of near misses, of equipment malfunctions, of the relentless pressure that clawed at every miner in the depths of Xylos. His eyes, though, were the most striking feature. Once they'd been a clear, steely gray, the color of a Xylosian storm sky. Now they were permanently tinged with orange, the Kryll dust seeping into his very being. They were the eyes of a man who had seen too much darkness, too much loss, but still held a flickering ember of hope. Kryll orange, a brand of his profession, a mark of his servitude, but also a defiant spark that refused to be extinguished. He coughed, a dry, hacking sound that rattled in his chest. The air scrubbers in his oxygen mask were barely functioning, filtering out only a fraction of the Kryll dust and methane that permeated the mine. He tasted the Kryll, that cloying sweetness that clung to his tongue, a constant reminder of the slow poison he was inhaling with every breath. "Cycle up, Papa Jax?" A youthful voice crackled over his comm. It was Lyra, his daughter. Jax gripped the pulse rifle tighter, a surge of protective instinct coursing through him. "Just about, Lyra bird," he replied, forcing a cheerfulness into his voice that he didn't feel. "How's Seam 7 treating you?" "Rough," she admitted. "Readings are unstable. Foreman's got us on high alert. Can't wait for break." Jax's unease intensified. "Stay sharp, Lyra bird. And don't push yourself. We'll be out of here soon, I promise." He knew the promise was hollow. They were trapped, all of them, in this endless cycle of Kryll mining, barely eking out a living for the Council, the faceless authority that ruled Xylos and demanded its pound of Kryll flesh. "I know, Dad," Lyra said, her voice tired but resolute. "Just trying to earn enough creds for that new filter you wanted." Jax's heart ached. She was always thinking of him, putting his needs before her own. She deserved so much more than this life of constant toil and peril. She deserved to see the real sun, to breathe clean air, to have a chance at something beyond the suffocating grip of the Kryll mine. He slammed his fist against the control panel of the mining rig, a frustrated growl escaping his lips. "Damn the Council," he muttered under his breath. The narration begins. The voice is low, gravelly, tinged with world weariness and a touch of defiance. Narrator: "They call us Kryll junkies, hopeless addicts, bound to this frozen tier of a planet by an invisible chain. They see only our need, our dependence on the orange dust that fuels their cities and their wars. They forget we are more than just a resource to be exploited. They forget we are people." Jax focused on his work, trying to ignore the tremor in his hands. He needed to concentrate, to extract enough Kryll to meet his quota and keep a little extra for his family. He would not let his daughter become another statistic, another broken body consumed by Xylos. He would find a way out. His thoughts drifted back to a time before the Kryll, before the cold, before the endless toil. He remembered his home on Earth, a distant, half-forgotten paradise. He remembered the green fields, the blue skies, the warmth of the sun on his skin. It felt like a dream now, a faded photograph from a life he could barely grasp. The siren call of the Kryll brought him back to reality. His sensors indicated a rich vein nearby, pulsing with potent energy. This could be it, the strike that would finally give them a chance to escape, to buy their freedom. He repositioned the mining rig, his movements precise and efficient. He calibrated the laser drill, the air growing thick with anticipation. He could almost taste the freedom, feel the warmth of a real sun on his face. He took a deep breath and activated the drill. The mine roared to life, the laser carving into the Kryll with blinding intensity. The ground vibrated violently, but Jax held firm, his focus unwavering. He watched the readings on his console, the numbers climbing steadily, promising a wealth beyond his wildest dreams. Suddenly, the readings spiked, the console flashing red. The air crackled with energy, a palpable sense of impending doom. "Jax! Get out of there!" Mara's voice shrieked over the comm. "Massive energy surge! The whole seam is going to blow!" This time, Jax didn't hesitate. He knew what that meant. A chain reaction, a catastrophic explosion that would obliterate everything within a kilometer radius. Seam 7, Lyra, all of them were in its path. He killed the drill, grabbing his pulse rifle. He had to reach Lyra, had to get her out of there. He sprinted towards Seam 7, ignoring the warning sirens and the frantic calls over the comm. His heart pounded in his chest, a drumbeat of fear and adrenaline. He could see the entrance to Seam 7, the flickering light beckoning him forward. He pushed himself harder, his lungs burning, his legs aching. He had to be faster, stronger. Then, the ground lurched violently. A deafening roar erupted behind him, followed by a shockwave that slammed into his back, throwing him forward. The tunnel collapsed, the entrance to Seam 7 vanishing behind a wall of ice and rock. He scrambled to his feet, coughing and sputtering, his vision blurred. He pounded on the debris, desperate to reach his daughter. Lyra! Lyra! Are you there? Silence. He hammered at the ice and rock with his fists, his pulse rifle, anything he could find. But it was no use. The tunnel was sealed, a tomb for those trapped inside. He sank to his knees, a hollow ache consuming him. He had failed. He had promised to protect her, and he had failed. He had sacrificed himself for nothing. He closed his eyes, tears freezing on his face. Lyra! He didn't see the blue glow engulf him, didn't feel the strange energy coursing through his veins. He didn't know that his sacrifice, though seemingly futile, had set in motion a chain of events that would change his destiny forever. The tremor was no longer a background rumble. It was a violent, bone-jarring lurch that sent miners sprawling. Jax instinctively shielded his face, the gritty ice spraying like shrapnel. The air, already thick with Xylos dust, now choked with newly pulverized rock, making each breath a painful rasp. Brace yourselves! Foreman Mara's voice, amplified by the comms, was a frantic screech. Emergency lockdown! Repeat, emergency lockdown! But it was too late for lockdowns. The mountain had decided. A colossal groan echoed through the mine, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very soul of the planet. Then, a section of the tunnel roof, directly ahead of Jax and his group, fractured. A hairline crack spiderwebbed across the ice, rapidly widening, until it became a gaping fissure. The glittering orange Kryll vein that had been exposed was now swallowed by the darkness behind the collapsing ceiling. The roar was deafening. Not the rhythmic drumming of the drills, but a monstrous, primordial sound of the earth giving way. Chunks of ice, rock, and mangled support beams rained down, turning the tunnel into a deadly shooting gallery. Panic seized the group. Miners screamed, scrambling for cover, their headlamps casting frantic, useless beams into the swirling dust. One miner, a youngling barely old enough to shave, tripped and fell, his body disappearing beneath a cascade of debris. Jax's mind, honed by years of reacting to crises in the unforgiving environment, clicked into overdrive. Lyra, behind me! He roared, shoving her towards a narrow crevice between two support beams. The crevice was small, barely enough room for three, but it offered some semblance of protection. He pushed two of the other miners inside, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve. He had to buy them time, had to give them a chance. But the mountain wasn't finished. The pressure increased, the support beams groaning like dying beasts. Jax felt the beam against his back start to buckle, groaning as it splintered. It's going to give! He yelled. Get ready to move! Another section of the roof collapsed, blocking the tunnel behind them. Escape was no longer an option. The mountain had them cornered. Jax assessed their situation. They had seconds, maybe a minute at most. The crevice was their only chance, but it wouldn't hold for long. He saw Lyra, her face pale and streaked with dust, her eyes wide with terror. He couldn't bear to see her die like this, trapped in the darkness, crushed by the unforgiving weight of Xylos. He knew what he had to do. Lyra, he said, his voice calm and resolute, belying the terror that threatened to consume him. Listen to me. When the beam gives, you have to run. Head for the surface. Find Mara. She'll know what to do. But Dad, Lyra protested, tears streaming down her face. No arguments! Jax snapped, his voice firm. This is an order. Now promise me you'll do it. Lyra, her face illuminated by the flickering light of his headlamp, looked into his eyes, and for a moment, he saw the child she had been, before the Kryll stole her innocence. She swallowed hard, nodded. I promise, Dad. Good girl, Jax said, managing a weak smile. Now hold on tight. He braced himself against the buckling beam, the pressure against his back intensifying. He could feel the wood splintering beneath his fingers, the air crackling with static electricity. He glanced at the other miners, their faces pale and resigned. He knew they understood what was coming. They were Kyll junkies, hardened by years of hardship, but even they couldn't face this kind of death without fear. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the stale, toxic air. He thought of his wife, Ilara, lost to the mines years ago. He hoped he would see her again, in whatever afterlife awaited them. He thought of Lyra, his bright, resilient daughter. He prayed that she would survive, that she would find a way to escape this frozen hellhole and build a better life for herself. Then it happened. The support beam finally gave way, snapping with a sound like a thunderclap. Jax felt a searing pain in his back as the collapsing roof slammed into him. He screamed, a primal roar of defiance against the crushing weight of the mountain. He saw Lyra's face, a kaleidoscope of terror and grief, as the tunnel sealed shut. Then, darkness consumed him. But before the darkness was absolute, a strange, pulsating blue light enveloped him. A feeling of weightlessness, of being pulled apart and put back together again, washed over him. Then nothing. The echoes of the collapse faded, replaced by an eerie silence. The Kyll mine, once a symbol of hope and despair, was now a tomb, a monument to sacrifice and loss. The first thing Jax registered was the cold. Not the familiar, bone-deep chill of the Kyll mine, but a sterile, artificial cold that felt alien and unnerving. It seeped through him, clinging to his skin, a constant, persistent hum against his senses. He tried to move, but his limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. Like wading through solidified Kyll dust. His eyes, accustomed to the dim, flickering light of the mine, struggled to adjust to the soft, pervasive, green luminescence that filled the room. It wasn't a natural light, but something manufactured, a cold, efficient glow that did little to alleviate the oppressive atmosphere. The room was a stark, minimalist space, constructed from polished, seamless panels that reflected the green light in unsettling ways. No visible seams, no rough edges, no imperfections. It was too clean, too sterile, too perfect. Jax found it deeply unsettling, a stark contrast to the gritty, chaotic reality he knew. Strange, humming machinery lined the walls, pulsing with an unseen energy. Wires, cables, and tubes snaked across the ceiling, disappearing into the smooth panels. There were holographic displays flickering with indecipherable symbols, intricate consoles covered with buttons and glyphs that meant nothing to him. He felt like a specimen in a jar, surrounded by instruments he couldn't comprehend, a world away from the familiar tools of his trade. He was lying on a table, cold and metallic, its surface contoured to fit his body. Straps of some flexible, shimmering material held him in place, restricting his movement. He tugged against them, finding them surprisingly resilient. "Easy," a voice said, smooth and melodious, yet laced with an unsettling detachment. "Movement is not advised at this stage." Jax strained his neck, trying to identify the source of the voice. A figure moved into his field of vision, blocking the soft green light. It was an alien. He'd seen aliens before. Miners sometimes unearthed strange relics, artifacts of long-dead civilizations buried deep within the Kyll deposits. He'd even seen off-world traders on the surface, their ships shimmering like mirages in the Xylosian storms. But this was different. This was no trader, no fossilized relic. This was something else. Her skin was a vibrant turquoise, smooth and flawless, like polished jade. Her features were delicate, almost ethereal, with high cheekbones and a narrow jawline. Her head was elongated, almost ovoid, and crowned with a delicate circlet of shimmering metal. Her eyes were the most striking feature, large black orbs that seemed to absorb all the light around them. They were like pools of liquid darkness, devoid of pupils, and held an intelligence that made Jax's skin crawl. She moved with an unnatural grace, gliding across the room as if she were weightless. Her movements were precise and economical, betraying a deep control over her body. She wore a simple, flowing garment of shimmering white fabric that clung to her form, accentuating her otherworldly beauty. "Who are you?" Jax rasped, his voice still rough from the mine collapse. "What is this place?" She approached the table, her black eyes fixed on him with an unsettling intensity. She reached out a long, slender hand, her fingers tipped with delicate, almost crystalline nails. Jax instinctively flinched away, but the restraints held him firmly in place. "I am Anya," she said, her voice still filtered and strangely detached. "And this is a place of beginnings." "Beginnings?" Jax repeated, suspicion lacing his voice. "What kind of beginning? Where am I?" Anya ignored his questions, her gaze unwavering. "You were dead, Jax. Crushed by the weight of the mountain. Your body irreparable." She paused, her black eyes narrowing slightly. "But your mind, your consciousness, that was another matter. I salvaged it. I preserved it. And I have given it a new vessel." Jack stared at his hands, at the faint metallic sheen woven into his skin. He remembered the burning pain, the crushing weight, the final, desperate moments before oblivion. How could he be alive? How could this be real? "What did you do to me?" he demanded, his voice rising in anger. Anya tilted her head again, a flicker of something that might have been pity crossing her face. "I gave you a second chance. A chance to live, to serve a greater purpose." "A purpose?" Jack scoffed. "What purpose could I possibly serve? I'm just a miner, a Kryll junkie. What good am I to you?" Anya smiled, a fleeting, almost unsettling expression. "You underestimate yourself, Jax. Your strength, your resilience, your adaptability, these are valuable qualities. And I need someone with your skills for a task that could determine the fate of my people." She stepped away from the table, her gaze sweeping over the machinery that lined the walls. "My world, it is dying. We are running out of time, running out of Kryll, the energy source that sustains us." "Kryll?" Jax repeated, a flicker of recognition sparking in his mind. The same stuff that trapped his people on Xylos. "Yes, Kryll," Anya said, her voice hardening slightly. "You know its power. You also know its scarcity. The Council, the governing body of my planet, has exhausted our natural reserves. We are on the brink of collapse." She turned back to him, her black eyes boring into his. "I have discovered a new source of Kryll, a vast and untapped deposit hidden on a distant planet. But the journey is perilous, the obstacles insurmountable for ordinary beings." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I need someone with your strength, your skill, your desperation, to help me secure this Kryll. I need you, Jax." Jax looked around the sterile lab, at the unfamiliar machinery, the impassive alien before him. He thought of Lyra, her face etched with fear, her future hanging in the balance. "And if I refuse?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Anya's expression didn't change. "Then you will remain here, in this state of suspended animation. Neither alive nor dead, existing only as a potential. A wasted potential." He knew what she meant. He would be trapped in this alien prison, his mind drifting in a sea of nothingness, forever haunted by the memory of Lyra. He couldn't do that. He couldn't abandon her again. Jax closed his eyes, took a deep breath. The stale, recycled air burned in his lungs, but it also filled him with a strange, newfound resolve. "What do I have to do?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Anya smiled, a genuine smile this time, revealing rows of perfectly white, almost crystalline teeth. "You have to save my world, Jax. And in doing so, perhaps you will save your own." The strange machinery around him hummed, the green light pulsed. He felt a surge of energy coursing through his veins, a burning, intoxicating power. He was no longer the broken, weary Kryll miner. He was something more. He was Anya's weapon. He was Xylos's hope. And he was going to do whatever it took to protect his daughter,